raspberries, whether they're ever-bearing, like these guys here, or maybe summer-bearing, like many of you are growing at home, need to be pruned and cleaned every year to maximize growth and production and to minimize disease. As we saw in the previous video explaining the perils of fall pruning, the temptation to prune these guys in October and November is through the roof. The urge to clean and organize your garden at the end of summer production is at its peak, but you have to resist the temptation. You have to leave your raspberry patch alone in the fall, and in this video, I'll show you not only when to prune, but how to prune both your ever-bearing and summer-bearing raspberries. Hey guys, if you're new to the channel, first up, I want to thank you for stopping by. Here at the Right Tomato Farms, we talk about all things to maximize the growth and potential of your backyard vegetable garden. If producing clean and fresh organic veggies for you and your family is something you're passionate about, consider hitting that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. People love to clean up and cut down their raspberries at the end of summer and into the fall. This is a huge mistake. Raspberries should be pruned and cleaned in the early spring or at least late winter. For summer-bearing one-crop raspberries, this is easy. Simply cut down to the soil level any weak or damaged canes and thin those canes to roughly 6 inches apart in your raspberry patch. Now, for ever-bearing raspberries that produce 2 crops, I actually filmed my process on how I do it last March, so let's check it out. So with ever-bearing raspberries, as well as your blackberries, you're going to want to note that there's 2 different types of canes. Now by cane, I simply just mean the shoot that's coming out of the ground. These plants, particularly the ever-bearing varieties, have 2 different types of canes. The first cane you'll come across is the Floricane. You can see here, this is an entire batch of Floricanes. Hi, Emma. After they were done fruiting, a lot of people will simply just cut them down. And, rightly so. They look pretty spindly. They don't look like they're going to produce much. But that's a big mistake with these ever-bearing varieties. Now, the second type of cane is called a Primocane. And this is the cane that arises in late fall and early winter and continues to grow throughout the winter and into the spring. And it is a more lush shoot. They're often a lot bigger. And this is what people will leave alone, thinking that this is the only shoot that will produce berries for them. So, in amongst all my Floricanes here, you can see a batch of 4 Primocanes, and they are huge. They're huge and they're green. They're green even when you cut them right at the top here. Whereas if you were to take a Floricane and cut it down right here, probably even down to here, it would be brown. So, completely different type of growth. So now that we know the 2 different types of canes, we can devise a plan to now prune the patch. So we know the Floricanes will produce the first berries of the year, late spring, early summertime. Then we know as we go on in the growing season, the late summer, early fall, the berries will be produced by the Primocanes. So knowing this, there's only one way to prune your patch to guarantee that you're going to get an ever-bearing crop for that season. So in your patch, there's actually only 2 shoots you're going to want to prune. The first shoots you're going to want to prune are going to be last year's Floricanes, in that they're completely dead. They're not going to produce anything. You can cut them down right to the soil level. You're going to want to do those first to get them all out of the way and give you more room to work in your patch. You're going to need 2 tools for this. You're going to need a thick pair of gloves and your pruning shears. So here I'll give you 2 perfect examples of last year's Floricane that you're going to want to get rid of. So let's follow this guy all the way down, all the way down, all the way down. Nothing growing. Okay. Similar over here. This guy right here, all the way down. Nothing growing. So these guys we want to cut out first. Okay, so now that we got rid of all of last year's Floricanes, we have to prune this year's Floricanes. And this part is really easy, especially now that you've already taken out the old, dead, 2-year-old Floricanes. So you can see here, we got a group of 3 Floricanes. There's the old fruiting heads, because these were last year's Primocanes, correct? So they all fruited in the late fall, early winter, or you know, probably mid to late fall, maybe not into winter. And so these guys, you know, the theory is to cut them right there where all this new growth starts, and I'll do that for some of them, but if I left that for all of them, this patch would get absolutely massive. So for some of them, you know, I'll leave maybe 1 or 2 growth nodes on there and then cut them right there. And we got to do that with all the Floricanes. And so usually in your patch, you know, what I've noticed the last 6 years of growing raspberries is that this will be most of your shoots. You'll have probably, you know, 15 to 20% 2-year-old Floricanes you got to cut right down, and then maybe you'll have 10%, 20% this year's Primocanes, but the rest of it, you know, 60-70% is going to be these Floricanes that need to be sort of chopped down at a specific height. So that is the key to the success of growing ever-bearing raspberries. So I'm going to go ahead and prune the bulk of these right now. So as you can see, quite a bit different looking patch right now. You know, a lot cleaner, pretty much just green growth showing, with the odd Floricane that's just got buds that are still coming out. But you can really see how it cleans up the bed and sets it up for the year's fruiting. So you might have noticed when I was cutting those 1-year Floricanes that I was also, you know, cutting some down right at the bottom. Some of that was just the 2-year-old Floricanes that I missed because, you know, the patch was so overloaded. But also, I do like to stagger the Floricanes so they're not all the same height, so I get a huge, bush of raspberries. You see down here, now this is a tall Floricane, but it's got a bush of new growth right down at the bottom here, all that stuff. So for a few of these, I'll cut them right down at the bottom, and then that bush of growth will just go wild. It's a really great way to invigorate the patch and get more growth and more production, obviously. So now that you've done all the pruning, there's one more step at this time of year that I like to do, and that's to mulch the bed. Obviously, I mulch it all through winter whenever I get the opportunity. But right now, I make sure to mulch it really, really heavily going into all the spring waterings, because as this patch gets bigger and thicker and more bushy, it gets really hard to get that mulch in. So I'm going to go ahead now and put a 3 to 4 inch layer of mulch in there. Now don't worry about burying those bushes at the bottom. Raspberries are a very vigorous plant. Do not worry, they will find their way through the mulch. So there you go. There's an 8-foot patch of ever-bearing raspberries, completely dealt with. Won't have to really do much else other than water, possibly give them a late summer mulching. Other than that, these guys will just continue to produce fruit, carefree, maintenance-free. If you have any questions or comments, definitely leave them down below. Click subscribe if you haven't already. For those of you that have, I really do appreciate the support. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you next time. These Primocanes are huge. I don't think I ever remember them being 5 feet tall in March any other season, especially with the snow we had. I can't wait for raspberries.